The warning alarm echoed through the bridge of the Earthship Valiant as it traveled through the dark space near the outer rim. Captain Jake Morrison sat in his command chair, watching the stars through the main screen. His crew worked quietly, at their stations, checking systems and monitoring their patrol route. "Captain, we're getting a signal," said Amy Foster from her communication station. Her fingers moved quickly over the controls as she tried to clean up the transmission. "It's weak, but it's definitely a distress call." Morrison leaned forward, in his chair. "Put it through." The bridge speakers crackled with static. Then a strange voice came through. The words were broken and hard to understand, spoken in basic universal language that sounded desperate and frightened. "Help us. Our world dies. We have children. Please, anyone who hears this, help us." The message repeated 3 times before, cutting to static. The bridge fell silent as everyone looked at their captain. Morrison rubbed his chin, thinking. They had been on patrol for 2 weeks, and this was the first distress call they had received. "Amy, can you trace where that signal came from?" Morrison asked. Foster worked at her station, running the signal through the ship's computers. "Yes, sir. It's coming from a system about 6 hours away at full speed. The star charts show it as the Zephyria system." "Lisa, what do we know about that system?" Morrison turned to his second-in-command, Lisa Park, who was already pulling up information on her tablet. Park read from her screen. 1 star, 5 planets. The 3rd planet is listed as inhabited by a species called the Corvani, pre-warp civilization. No contact with the Galactic Council. She paused, reading more. "Captain, there's a notice here from 6 months ago. The star is unstable and entering collapse phase." Dr. Ben Carter, the ship's science officer, looked up from his station. "Captain, if their star is collapsing, that planet won't be safe much longer. The radiation levels alone would be deadly, not to mention what happens when the star finally goes nova." Morrison stood and walked to the main screen, staring at the stars. He had been a starship captain for 12 years and had seen many worlds, but he had never faced a situation like this. An entire species calling for help while their world died around them. "Amy, send a message to Earth Command. Tell them we've received a distress call from the Zephyria system and are investigating." "Yes, sir," Foster replied, her hands already working on the message. "Ron, set course for Zephyria Prime, maximum speed." Chief Engineer Ron Blake nodded from his station. "Course set, Captain. We'll be there in 5 hours and 43 minutes. As the Valiant changed direction and sped toward the dying system, Morrison called for his senior staff to meet in the conference room. Within minutes, Park, Carter, Blake, and Dr. Kate Sullivan, the chief medical officer, gathered around the table. Morrison activated the room's main screen, showing what little information they had about the Corvani and their world. "Tell me what we're dealing with, Ben." Carter stood and pointed to the display. "The Corvani are humanoid, about the same size as humans but with blue skin and what appears to be crystalline bone structure. They breathe oxygen like we do. Their technology level is roughly equal to Earth in the mid-2000s, no space travel capability." "How many of them are there?" asked Dr. Sullivan. "The last survey done about 10 years ago estimated around 40,000 individuals spread across 17 different settlements on their world," Carter replied. Blake shook his head. 40,000 people and no way to get off their planet. That's a nightmare." "What's the timeline, Ben?" Morrison asked. "How long do they have?" Carter looked grim. "Based on the stellar data, I'd say 3 years at most before the planet becomes completely uninhabitable. But the radiation levels are probably already affecting them. They might have less time than that." Park spoke up. "Captain, I should mention that Earth Command sent a response to our message. They want us to observe and report only. No direct contact with the Corvani." "What about the Galactic Council?" "Surely they're planning some kind of rescue mission," Dr. Sullivan said. Carter pulled up another screen. "I checked the Galactic database. The Council reviewed the Corvani situation 8 months ago. They decided not to intervene. Listed reason was insufficient strategic value and excessive resource cost." The room fell quiet. Morrison felt a knot form in his stomach. 40,000 people were going to die, and the most powerful organization in the galaxy had decided they weren't worth saving. What about other species? The Altarians or the Centauri? Morrison asked. The Altarians looked into it but backed out when they saw the numbers. The Centauri said it wasn't economically feasible, Park replied, reading from her tablet. Blake leaned back in his chair. So everyone's just going to let them die? It looks that way, Carter said quietly. Morrison stood and walked to the conference room's window, looking out at the stars rushing past as they traveled toward Zephyria. He thought about his own children back on Earth, safe and happy. He thought about what it would feel like to watch the sky burn brighter every day, knowing that death was coming and there was nothing you could do to stop it. Captain, Park said. Earth Command was very clear. We're to observe and report only. No contact, no interference. Morrison turned back to his officers. These were good people, all of them. They had families, dreams, careers to think about. If he defied Earth Command's orders, he could destroy all their futures along with his own. I know what Command said, Morrison replied, but I also know what's right. He looked around the table at each of his officers. We're going to save them, all of them. The room erupted in surprised voices, but Morrison held up his hand for silence. I know the risks, I know what this means for all of us. But I can't live with myself if we just watch 40,000 people die when we have the power to help them. Dr. Sullivan was the first to speak. The Valiant isn't designed for mass evacuation, Captain. We'd be lucky to fit 800 passengers in emergency conditions. Then we'll make multiple trips, Morrison said simply. Blake ran quick calculations in his head. Captain, that would take months, maybe more than a year. Then that's how long it takes. Park looked worried. Sir, Earth Command will never authorize this. They'll order us to stop. Morrison smiled grimly. Then we better not give them the chance. As the Valiant continued toward the dying world of Zephyria Prime, Captain Jake Morrison made a decision that would change the course of galactic history. He was about to prove that sometimes one person, one ship, and one crew could make all the difference in the universe. The Valiant dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of the Zephyria system, and the crew immediately saw why the Corvani were dying. Their sun blazed with an angry red light, much brighter than it should have been. Solar flares shot out from its surface like deadly fingers reaching into space. Dear God, whispered Dr. Carter as he studied his readings. The radiation levels are off the charts. That star could go nova any day now. Captain Morrison stood behind Carter's station, watching the data scroll across the screen. The third planet, Zephyria Prime, glowed with a sickly yellow light as the dying star's radiation hit its atmosphere. How long do they really have, Ben? Morrison asked quietly. Carter checked his calculations twice before answering. 6 months, maybe less. The radiation is already poisonous. Every day they stay on that planet, more of them will get sick and die. Morrison felt the weight of 40,000 lives pressing down on him. 6 months to save an entire species with one ship, and a crew of 300. It seemed impossible, but he had made his choice. All hands, this is the captain, Morrison announced over the ship's communication system. Report to the main cargo bay in 15 minutes. We have important work to do. The crew gathered in the large cargo bay, their faces curious and worried. Morrison looked out at the men and women who served under him. These were good people who had followed him across the galaxy without question. Now he was asking them to risk everything. By now you all know why we're here, Morrison began. The Corvani are dying, and no one else is coming to help them. Earth Command has ordered us not to interfere. The Galactic Council has written them off. Every other species in the galaxy has decided these people aren't worth saving. He paused, looking around the room. I disagree. We're going to evacuate every single Corvani from that planet and take them somewhere safe. The cargo bay erupted in surprised voices. Some crew members looked excited, others worried. Chief Engineer Blake stepped forward. Captain, with respect, the Valiant can carry maybe 800 people in emergency conditions. We're talking about 40,000 aliens. Then we make multiple trips, Ron. As many as it takes. Dr. Sullivan raised her hand. Sir, we don't know anything about Corvani biology. What if our life support systems can't handle them? What if they carry diseases that could kill us all? Morrison nodded. Those are good questions, Kate. That's why we're going to be very careful. We'll start small, learn as we go, and adapt. Lieutenant Dan Cooper, one of the shuttle pilots, spoke up. Captain, where are we going to take them? We can't bring 40,000 aliens back to Earth. There's an uninhabited planet in the Kepler system about 16 light years from here, Morrison replied. It's been marked for human colonization, but no one lives there yet. The Corvani can build a new home there. Amy Foster looked nervous. Sir, Earth Command is going to be furious when they find out what we're doing. Morrison smiled grimly. Then we better not tell them until it's too late to stop us. Over the next few hours, the crew of the Valiant worked with desperate energy to prepare for the impossible mission. Blake and his engineering teams began converting cargo bays into temporary living spaces. They installed extra life support systems, emergency food supplies, and basic medical facilities. Dr. Sullivan studied every piece of information they had about Corvani biology, preparing for the medical challenges they would face. The aliens breathed oxygen like humans, but their blue skin and crystalline bones might react differently to human medicine. Cooper and the other shuttle pilots planned flight routes down to the planet's surface. The radiation from the dying star would make flying dangerous, but they had no choice. Meanwhile, Morrison sat in his quarters recording a message that he hoped he would never have to send. Admiral Hayes, if you're watching this, it means we've been discovered and you're probably very angry with me. I want you to know that I take full responsibility for this mission. My crew is following orders. My orders. If anyone is going to be court-martialed, it should be me alone. He paused, thinking about his wife and children back on Earth. I know this will end my career, but I can't live with myself if I don't try to save these people. Every species deserves a chance to survive. The next morning, the Valiant entered orbit around Zephyria Prime. The planet looked sick from space, its blue oceans turned green by radiation, and its white clouds stained yellow, but long-range sensors showed cities still functioning on the surface. The Corvani were still alive, still fighting to survive. Amy, open a channel to the planet, Morrison ordered. Foster worked at her station, trying different frequencies until she found one that worked. Channel open, Captain. This is Captain Jake Morrison of the Earthship Valiant. We received your distress call and we're here to help. Please respond. For several minutes, there was only static. Then a voice came through, speaking in broken universal language. Earthship, this is Scythka of the Corvani people. You came? Others said no one would come. Morrison felt his throat tighten. The hope in that alien voice was almost too much to bear. We're here, Scythka. We're going to get you and your people off this planet. All of us? The voice asked in disbelief. There are many thousands. All of you, Morrison promised. It will take time, but we won't leave anyone behind. There was a long pause. Then, the sound of what might have been crying. Thank you, Captain Morrison. Thank you. Over the next several hours, Cooper and his shuttle teams made contact with Corvani settlements across the planet. The aliens were humanoid, about the same height as humans but thinner, with large black eyes and blue skin that seemed to shimmer in the light. Their fear was obvious, but so was their gratitude. Blake reported that the first converted cargo bay was ready to hold 600 passengers. Dr. Sullivan had prepared medical stations to check each refugee for radiation sickness and other health problems. But as the first shuttle prepared to launch toward the planet's surface, Amy Foster received a priority message from Earth Command. Captain, she said quietly, Admiral Hayes is demanding an immediate response. He's ordering us to abort this mission and return to Earth right now. Morrison looked around his bridge at the faces of his crew. These people had chosen to follow him into this impossible situation. They deserved to know what they were risking. Amy, send a message to Admiral Hayes. Tell him we have a Code 7 humanitarian emergency in progress and we're maintaining radio silence until the situation is Resolved. Foster's eyes widened. Code 7 was reserved for the most serious emergencies, situations where a ship's captain could ignore all other orders to save lives. Sir, the Admiral isn't going to accept that explanation. Morrison stood and walked to the main screen, looking down at the dying world below. Somewhere on that poisoned planet, 40,000 people were waiting for rescue. Children were asking their parents why the sky was getting brighter. Families were watching their loved ones get sick from the radiation. Then he'll have to court-martial me when we get back, Morrison said quietly. Launch the first shuttle, Dan. Let's bring our new friends home. As the shuttle departed for the planet's surface, the crew of the Valiant began the most important mission of their lives. They were about to prove that sometimes doing the right thing mattered more than following orders. The first group of Corvani refugees stepped off the shuttle and into the cargo bay of the Valiant. Captain Morrison watched from the observation deck as his crew helped the frightened aliens find their temporary living spaces. The Corvani were smaller than he had expected, with thin bodies and large black eyes that seemed to take in everything around them. Dr. Sullivan moved among the refugees, checking them for radiation sickness with her medical scanner. Most of them were weak and tired but alive. The children stayed close to their parents, pointing at the human crew members and whispering in their own language. "How are they doing, Kate?" Morrison asked over his communicator. "Better than I expected, Captain," Sullivan replied. "The radiation exposure has made them weak, but their crystalline bone structure seems to protect them from the worst effects. I think they'll recover once we get them away from that dying star." Over the next 3 days, the shuttles made dozens of trips between the ship and the planet, each time they returned with more Corvani families. The cargo bays filled with blue-skinned refugees who had never been in space before. Many of them were scared, but they trusted the humans who had come to save them. Blake worked constantly to keep the ship's systems running. The life support was pushed to its limits with nearly 900 people aboard instead of the usual 300. "Captain, we're using 3 times as much oxygen as normal. The water recycling system is running at maximum capacity." "Can we handle it, Ron?" Morrison asked. "For now, yes. But we can't do this for months without some serious modifications." Morrison nodded. They would have to make changes as they went. This was all new territory for everyone. The real test came when they reached Haven's Rest, the uninhabited planet in the Kepler system. The world was beautiful, with green hills and blue oceans that reminded Morrison of Earth. The gravity was slightly higher than both Earth and Zephyria Prime, but the Corvani seemed to adapt quickly. Sith Ka, the elderly Corvani leader, stood beside Morrison on the bridge as they orbited their new home. "It is beautiful, Captain Morrison. Our children will be safe here." "This is just the beginning, Sith Ka. We have many more trips to make." The old alien looked at him with her large, black eyes. "Why do you do this for us? Your own leaders told you not to help." Morrison thought about the question. "Because it's the right thing to do. Every person deserves a chance to live." The evacuation process became a routine over the following months. The Valiant would load up with Corvani refugees, make the jump to hyperspace and travel to Haven's Rest. Then they would return to Zephyria Prime for another group. Each round trip took about 2 weeks. By the 4th trip, the crew had learned to work with their Corvani passengers. The aliens were quick, learners, and eager to help. Rethmore, a Corvani engineer, began working with Blake's team to improve the ship's power systems. His people's understanding of crystal technology helped make the life support more efficient. The Corvani children formed friendships with the younger human crew members despite the language barrier. They drew pictures for each other and played simple games. Dr. Sullivan found that the alien children learned human words much faster than the adults. But the mission wasn't without dangers. During the 5th evacuation run, disaster nearly struck. The Valiant was in hyperspace with 800 Corvani aboard when a solar flare from Zephyria's dying star caused a massive electromagnetic pulse. The ship's navigation systems failed, leaving them lost in the darkness between stars. Navigator Carl Murphy worked for 2 straight days, using only backup sensors and manual calculations to figure out where they were. The Corvani passengers remained calm, somehow sensing that panic would only make things worse. Their ability to enter a kind of hibernation state during stress helped them survive the emergency. "I've got it, Captain," Murphy finally announced. "We're about 6 light years off course, but I can get us home." The repair took another day, but they made it safely to Haven's Rest. Morrison realized how close they had come to losing 800 lives in the empty space between stars. Meanwhile, Earth Command's protests grew louder with each trip. Admiral Hayes sent increasingly angry messages demanding that Morrison return to Earth immediately. The Galactic Council formally complained about humanity's reckless interference in what they called a natural process. "Captain, we're receiving another priority message from Admiral Hayes," Amy Foster reported during their 7th trip. Morrison didn't even look up from his reports. "File it with the others, Amy. We have work to do." But the pressure was building. Other human ships had been ordered to intercept the Valiant and force them to return to Earth. Morrison knew it was only a matter of time before they were caught. The breakthrough came from an unexpected source. During their 8th evacuation run, Sithka approached Morrison with an idea. "Captain, my people have been talking. We want to help more than just survive. We want to make sure the galaxy knows what you have done for us." "What do you mean, Sithka?" The old Corvani smiled, an expression that looked strange on her alien features. "We have contacts throughout the galaxy, trade partners, distant cousins on other worlds. We're going to tell them all about the humans who saved us when no one else would." Within days, the story of the Corvani rescue spread across dozens of star systems. News networks picked up the tale of the human captain who defied orders to save an entire species. Public opinion began to shift in Morrison's favor. On Earth, protests erupted demanding that Morrison be honored rather than court-martialed. The families of his crew members organized rallies supporting the mission. Even some members of the Earth Senate spoke out in favor of the rescue operation. The Corvani settlements on Haven's Rest grew stronger with each group of refugees. They built shelters, started farms, and began the work of rebuilding their civilization. Their technology advanced rapidly as they combined their crystal engineering with human designs. By the time of the final evacuation, Morrison and his crew had transported all 40,000 Corvani to safety. The dying star of Zephyria finally went nova just 3 weeks after the last shuttle left the planet's surface. As the Valiant made its final jump to Haven's Rest, Morrison stood on the bridge watching the hyperspace swirl past the main screen. His crew was exhausted but proud. They had done the impossible. "Captain," Foster called from her station, "we're receiving a message from Earth Command." Morrison sighed. "Admiral Hayes again?" "No, sir. This one's different. It's from the President herself." Morrison raised his eyebrows. The President of Earth rarely spoke directly to ship captains. "Put it through." The image that appeared on the main screen wasn't the angry face of Admiral Hayes, but the calm expression of President Martinez. "Captain Morrison, on behalf of the people of Earth, I want to thank you and your crew for your extraordinary service. You have made all of humanity proud." Morrison felt a weight lift from his shoulders. Maybe, just maybe, they had done more than save the Corvani. Maybe they had saved something important about humanity itself. Haven's Rest had changed completely in the 14 months since the first Corvani refugees arrived. What started as an empty world of green hills and blue seas now bustled with activity. Corvani settlements dotted the landscape, their crystal-based buildings shining in the sunlight of their new sun. Captain Morrison walked through the largest settlement with Sithka, watching as Corvani children played in gardens that their parents had planted from seeds brought from their dying homeworld. The children laughed and ran, their blue skin healthy and bright without the sickly radiation from Zephyria's collapsing star. "Your people have built something beautiful here," Morrison said, admiring the way the Corvani had designed their new city to work with the natural landscape instead of fighting against it. Sithka nodded proudly. "We learn fast when we are not dying. The higher gravity here makes us stronger. Our bones grow denser, our muscles work better. This world is good for us." They stopped at a large building where Corvani engineers worked alongside human technicians from the Valiant. Inside, teams were building something that looked like a spaceship, but unlike anything Morrison had seen before. "What are they making?" he asked. Our first starship, Scythka replied with a smile. We call it the Jake Morrison, after the human who gave us our future. Morrison felt embarrassed by the honor but also proud. The Corvani had not only survived, they were thriving. In just over a year, they had gone from a dying pre-space civilization to building their own warp-capable vessels. Reith Moore, the Corvani, engineer who had worked with Blake's team, approached them with a data tablet. Captain Morrison, we want to show you something. Our new crystal power systems are 40% more efficient than standard human designs. We would like to share this technology with your people. You don't owe us anything, Reith Moore, Morrison said. We helped because it was right, not because we expected payment. The Corvani engineer looked confused. This is not payment, Captain. This is friendship. When friends help each other, both become stronger. Morrison realized that the Corvani saw the universe differently than most species. They didn't think in terms of debt and payment, but in terms of community and mutual support. It was a beautiful way to live. The peaceful moment was interrupted by Amy Foster's voice over Morrison's communicator. Captain, we're receiving an urgent message from Earth Command. Admiral Hayes wants to speak with you immediately. Morrison sighed. He had been expecting this call for weeks. I'll be right there. Back on the Valiant, Morrison sat in his ready room facing the stern image of Admiral Hayes on his monitor. The Admiral's face was red with anger, and Morrison could see other Earth Command officers in the background. Captain Morrison, you are hereby ordered to return to Earth immediately to face charges of insubordination, unauthorized use of Federation resources, theft of government property, and violation of direct orders. Morrison had expected this, but it still hit him hard. His career was over, and probably his freedom too. I understand, Admiral. Do you, Captain? Do you understand that your reckless actions have caused a diplomatic crisis? The Galactic Council is furious with humanity. They're threatening to remove Earth from the Council entirely. I'm sorry to hear that, sir. Admiral Hayes leaned forward, his eyes blazing. You're sorry? You've destroyed your career, endangered your crew, and possibly damaged humanity's standing in the galaxy, and you're sorry? Before Morrison could answer, another voice cut into the transmission. It was Scythka, speaking from the Planetary Communication Center. Admiral Hayes of Earth Command, this is Scythka, elected leader of the Corvani people of Haven's Rest. I interrupt your conversation because we have something important to say. Hayes looked confused. This is a private military communication. You have no right to— We have every right, Scythka interrupted calmly. Captain Morrison saved our entire species when no one else would help us. While your Galactic Council counted the cost, he counted the lives. 40,000 Corvani children breathe free air today because of him. Other Corvani voices joined. And from across Haven's Rest, the planetary communication system carried their words to Earth and beyond. We will never forget what humanity did for us. We will tell our children, and their children's children about the day humans proved that some things matter more than politics. The message didn't stop there. Corvani traders throughout the galaxy began spreading the story to every species they met. Within hours, news networks across dozens of worlds were reporting on the human captain who defied orders to save an entire race from extinction. On Earth, the public response was immediate and overwhelming. Protests erupted in every major city demanding that Morrison be honored, not imprisoned. The families of the Valiant's crew organized rallies. Veterans groups spoke out in support of the mission. Even some Earth senators began questioning the wisdom of prosecuting a man who had saved 40,000 lives. Dr. Sullivan called Morrison from the ship's medical bay. Captain, you need to see this. I'm sending you a data file from the Corvani medical scans. Morrison opened the file and stared at the results. Kate, these numbers can't be right. They are, sir. The Corvani's crystalline bone structure isn't just resistant to radiation. It actually stores energy from certain types of radiation and converts it into biological power. They're naturally suited for space travel in ways we never realized. What does that mean? It means they're going to be incredibly valuable partners for any spacefaring civilization. Their biology gives them advantages in high radiation environments that no other known species has. Morrison realized the implications immediately. The Corvani weren't just grateful refugees anymore. They were potentially the most valuable allies in the galaxy. The next day brought more surprises. The Altarian Empire, embarrassed by humanity's moral leadership, announced new humanitarian programs to help struggling species. The Centauri Collective revised their policies to include ethical considerations in their decision-making process. Even the rigid Vulcani Assembly sent a formal message acknowledging that human emotional decision-making had produced superior outcomes in this instance. But the biggest surprise came from an unexpected source. The Galactic Council itself sent a delegation to Haven's Rest to meet with the Corvani and assess the situation. Council Representative Velthar, a tall gray alien with 4 arms, met with Morrison and Sethka in the settlement's main hall. Captain Morrison, the Council has reviewed your actions and their consequences. Morrison stood straight, ready to accept whatever judgment came. Yes, sir. Your violation of the non-interference directive was clear and undeniable, Velthar continued. However, the results of your actions have been significant. The representative turned to Sethka. The Corvani technological advances in crystal-based power systems have applications throughout the galaxy. Their unique biology makes them ideal partners for deep space exploration. Their cultural emphasis on community support offers lessons that many species could benefit from learning. Morrison waited, unsure where this was leading. The Council has decided to formally recognize the Corvani as a member species and Haven's Rest as their sovereign world. Furthermore, we are recommending that Earth Command commend Captain Morrison and his crew for their extraordinary humanitarian service. Morrison felt his knees go weak with relief. Not only were the charges being dropped, but the mission was being officially praised. Sithka spoke up. Representative Velthar, the Corvani people have one more thing to say. Captain Morrison showed us that the measure of a civilization is not its technology or its power, but its willingness to help those in need. We want to make sure the galaxy remembers this lesson. As Morrison looked around the room at the faces of humans, Corvani, and other alien species, he realized that something fundamental had changed. The rescue hadn't just saved one species from extinction. It had reminded the entire galaxy what it meant to be truly civilized. 5 years had passed since the rescue of the Corvani, and the galaxy was a different place. Captain Morrison, now Admiral Morrison, stood at the podium in the Great Hall of the Federation on Earth. Around him sat representatives from dozens of worlds, all gathered to celebrate the 5th anniversary of what historians were calling the Great Rescue. When we first received that distress call from Zephyria Prime, Morrison began, I never imagined that saving one species would change the entire galaxy. But that's exactly what happened. In the audience, Morrison could see familiar faces. Dr. Sullivan sat with her husband and children, proudly wearing her new uniform as Director of Interspecies Medical Research. Chief Engineer Blake had been promoted to head the new Human Corvani Technology Exchange Program. Amy Foster now served as Earth's primary communications officer with the Corvani worlds. Yes, worlds plural. The Corvani had not been content to stay on Haven's Rest. Their natural advantages in space travel had made them excellent explorers. They had founded 3 new colonies in the past 2 years, each one a thriving center of crystal-based technology and community cooperation. Morrison continued his speech. The Corvani taught us something important. They showed us that when you help others, you don't just save them. You save something inside yourself, too. Sithka, now much older but still sharp, sat in the front row with her granddaughter Lithka. The young Corvani woman wore the uniform of Earth's Starfleet Academy, where she had just graduated with the highest honors in her class. She was the first non-human to attend Earth's premier space service school. After the ceremony, Morrison found himself in his office with an unexpected visitor. Lithka stood at attention, her blue skin gleaming under the office lights, her large, black eyes serious and determined. Admiral Morrison, I want to serve on ships that help people the way you helped us. Will you teach me how to be that kind of officer? Morrison smiled, remembering his own early days as a young officer full of ideals and energy. The first lesson is simple, Lithka. When someone needs help, you help them. Everything else follows from that. But what about orders? What about regulations? What about the cost? Morrison walked to his office window, looking out at the busy spaceport where ships from dozens of worlds came and went every day. Many of them carried Corvani crew members now, their unique abilities making them highly sought after throughout the galaxy. Sometimes the right choice and the practical choice are the same thing, he said. You just have to be brave enough to see it. The truth of those words had been proven again and again over the past 5 years. The Corvani's crystal power technology had revolutionized space travel, making faster-than-light journeys 40% more efficient. Their natural resistance to radiation had opened up exploration of previously dangerous star systems. Their cultural emphasis on community cooperation had helped solve disputes between other species. But the most important change was in how the galaxy thought about helping others. The Morrison Doctrine, as it came to be known, had inspired dozens of rescue missions. The Altarian Empire now maintained a fleet of ships dedicated entirely to humanitarian missions. The Centauri Collective had established refugee centers on 12 different worlds. Even the Vulcani Assembly, known for their cold logic, had begun including compassion calculations in their decision-making processes. They had discovered that helping others often produced unexpected benefits that pure logic couldn't predict. Dr. Carter, now serving as Earth's ambassador to the Corvani, entered Morrison's office with a datapad full of reports. Admiral, you should see the latest numbers from the joint research projects. Morrison took the pad and scanned the information. The human Corvani research stations had produced breakthrough advances in medicine, energy production, and space exploration. Diseases that had plagued humanity for centuries were being cured using treatments based on Corvani crystal biology. New forms of clean energy were powering entire star systems. Ben, when we first picked up that distress call, did you ever imagine it would lead to all this? Carter shook his head in amazement. Never, sir. I thought we were just trying to save some people from a dying world. I had no idea we were changing the future of galactic civilization. A chime from Morrison's communicator interrupted their conversation. Admiral, you have an urgent message from the Kepler system, his secretary announced. Morrison activated his desktop screen and saw the face of Captain Steve Rogers, the current commander of the Valiant. Morrison's old ship was now the flagship of the Federation's humanitarian fleet, a new branch of service dedicated to helping people in crisis. Admiral Morrison, we've received a distress call from the Vega system. A species called the Thanari are facing extinction from a plague that's wiping out their crops. Their government is asking for help, but the Galactic Council says it's too expensive to intervene. Morrison felt a familiar stirring in his chest, the same feeling he had experienced 5 years ago when he first heard the Corvani distress call. What's your assessment, Steve? Sir, we can save them. It won't be easy, but we have the ships, the technology, and the crew to do it. The Corvani have volunteered to help too. They say they remember what it's like to have nowhere else to turn. Morrison smiled. The Corvani had learned the lesson well. They understood that being saved wasn't the end of the story. It was the beginning of the responsibility to save others. You have my authorization, Captain Rogers. Save the Thanari. Thank you, sir. The Valiant is already setting course for the Vega system. As the transmission ended, Morrison thought about the chain of events that had started with one desperate message from a dying world. The rescue of the Corvani had inspired the creation of the humanitarian fleet. The humanitarian fleet was now saving the Thanari. And someday the Thanari would probably save someone else. Lithka was still standing in his office, watching and learning. Admiral, is it always this simple? Just deciding to help when someone needs it? Morrison considered the question carefully. The decision is simple, Lithka. The execution is hard. Saving people requires sacrifice, courage, and the willingness to risk everything for strangers you've never met. But it's worth it? Morrison looked out his window again, watching a Corvani transport ship dock at the spaceport. Through the transparent aluminum, he could see Corvani families disembarking, probably visitors coming to Earth to study or work, or simply to see the world of the people who had saved them. Look around you, Lithka. 5 years ago, your people were dying on a poisoned world forgotten by the galaxy. Today, they're partners and friends to dozens of species. They're exploring new worlds, making scientific breakthroughs, and teaching others about the power of community. That's what happens when you choose to help instead of looking the other way. 6 months later, Morrison received word that the Thanari had been successfully relocated to a new world. Their entire species saved from extinction. The rescue had been carried out by a joint human-Corvani task force, with ships from 6 other species providing support. The Thanari's first message to the galaxy was simple. Thank you for showing us that we are not alone. When others need help, we will be ready. Morrison kept that message framed on his office wall, right next to the original distress call from Sith Ka that had started everything. Sometimes visitors would ask him about the 2 messages, and he would tell them the story of how one act of compassion had changed the galaxy forever. The lesson was simple but powerful. In a universe vast enough to make anyone feel small and alone, the willingness to help a stranger could be the most important thing any person ever did. The Corvani had learned that lesson from humanity, and now they were teaching it to others. And somewhere in the galaxy, on a world whose name Morrison didn't even know yet, someone was probably sending out a distress call right now, hoping that someone somewhere would care enough to help. Morrison smiled, knowing that thanks to what had started 5 years ago with 40,000 blue-skinned refugees, that call would not go unanswered.